All right, so here we go. Now, this is the funny thing as well. So, I actually, as Kelly said, we met and I was invited to come here and do this talk. And we spoke for a bit, and Kelly was like, look, they want you to do 30 minutes, because it's really hard to do 60 minutes. And I was like, oh, excuse you, I can talk for 60 minutes. And so then I was like, Kelly, you go in there and you fight for me for 60 minutes. And of course, Kelly being Kelly, she got me my 60 minutes, and then I was like, oh shit. So here we are. So without further ado, I'm going to step you through this talk. So yes, my name is Trent Kusters. I'm the chair of the Free Play Independent Games Festival, and I am also, I dabble. I lecture a bit in video game academia and stuff like that, but the reason why I'm here today is League of Geeks. And so I'm the co-founder and director of League of Geeks, one of the heads of the Hydra, as we say. And we made a video game called Armello, and it's a digital board game. We're trying to bring tabletop adventures to life. But essentially, I am not the only one in this equation. There's a number of people who came here, but especially these two other gentlemen who are also co-founders and directors of League of Geeks. Now, it actually says it on our website. I'm meant to be the poster boy and the front man of the band, or at least that's how it turns out. But these guys have been with me every step of the way. Everything you're about to hear, they went through, all the hardships, all the right decisions, even some of the wrong decisions, they were there. So I just wanted to acknowledge them and let you all know, because I'll be referencing them quite a bit. Also, I'm going to talk a lot about hustling and opportunities, and I think it's something that is incredibly important, but opportunities pass to me that don't pass to other people. So I just want to acknowledge the privilege that I receive being, a cisgendered white guy, middle class, growing up in, the most livable city in the world. So there's that as well. So please understand that as I move through this talk. Okay, so the Armello Postmortem, A Journey of Spirit and Peril. It's actually a part mortem. So Armello is out. We launched last September, but we're still updating it. It's still there. And it's getting updates every 6 to 8 weeks. What are we doing? Yeah. So really, this is just a part mortem. But then also, it took us 5 years to get the game out. And it's our only game. So it's really a League of Geeks part mortem too. So I'm going to talk through a few things. I'm going to do our 5 years in 5 minutes. I don't think I'll actually get through it in 5 minutes, because I first wrote my talk out and it was a big long thing, and that was kind of boring. So I crunched it down to 5 minutes, and then I'm just going to hit the hard points for you. All right, and then the next thing is I'm going to do Kickstarter, talk about that, and then I'm going to do a little bit about early access, and then our failures. Of course, we all know that's the juicy shit you all love. And then I'm going to talk about the log point system, which you'll hear a bit about, which is really what underpins our entire development. And then I'm going to talk a bit about relationships. All right, so 2009, this is what the games industry looked like, especially in Australia. This is studios, this is what it was. Every 7 years or so, a console would come along, blah, blah, blah. They'd turn this big ship around and they'd be able to weather the change. But then in 2011, global financial crisis happened, and essentially all of the studios in Australia closed down, and we're all basically holding on to our jobs for dear life. I remember in the space of about a month, 800 people probably lost their jobs in Australia. And also we're an animal video game, so this is probably a more apt slide for that part. So I left my job. I was design director at a studio, and I wandered around. I did some consulting and stuff, a bit of a Ronin. The consulting was actually sending me a bit stir crazy, so I went over to GDC in 2011, and I'm looking for jobs and sussing out what's out there. And there's something that I noticed, and that was that the indie renaissance was in full swing. It wasn't just a little thing that was happening anymore, but it was a real deal. For like the 5th year in a row, the IGF had a record number of entries, and the quality and the scale and the scope and everything was just increasing. And so these little guys could weather the storm, essentially. They could get through when all of these things were happening. You had these small little indie teams that were doing great things. And one game I was paying particular attention to was Bastion. And there was something that Greg Cassavan said in an interview that really sparked something for me. And he said that there were only 7 people on the team. 7 people for a game like Bastion in 2011. It's madness, right? And that wasn't what was happening or what we thought could happen. And so at this time as well, I was talking to the other directors, and well, we hadn't founded Log yet, but I was talking to them about doing something. We wanted to collaborate. That's all we knew. We just wanted to collaborate. We were talking about how we just wanted to work with the best people possible and make really cool things, and how things were changing, that might be possible. And so when Greg said this thing, 7 people, we were like, oh, maybe it can be done. Maybe a team of really talented folks can get together and make amazing things. So we thought, let's do it, right? But this is the problem. We didn't have any money. I just quit my job, and I'd blown all my money getting to GDC on the hopes that someone would hire me as the creative director of the next Ubisoft game. And when you don't have any money and you want to make some dope game, this is basically the response that you get from everyone. So, and this is a theme you're going to see throughout my talk, hopefully, if I've written it properly, is that there is always a way. And this is something that we've had at League of Geeks for a long time, and I think has shown why we've gotten to where we are in 5 years' time. And this thing in this instance was capital. We didn't have money, but we had capital. And capital can be used just the same as money. So assets available for use in the production of further assets. Well, I'm calling myself an asset there, because we had 4 of us, so there were 4 directors at the time when we got together, and we knew that we had local capital in our networks and our reputation in the Australian scene, and then we had worldwide capital in our talent and our experience. And so it clicked. What if we had this way of monetizing working in games, or gamifying it, so to use a gross term, gamifying actual game development, where people can share in the profits of a video game and come on for what we would end up calling a point system, where a number of tasks are assigned points and you come on, you get a profit share in. And this would enable us to scale up the team. From just 3 people, we could get people on, talented people from all around the world, because that's what we wanted, right? We wanted to work with the best people in the world and make the coolest things possible. And so League of Geeks was formed. We also started to talk about, because this is the first time we're indie, we're all studio folk. So like, what does this mean? What does being indie mean? So we sat down and we had a real big think about it. And now this isn't some sort of eligibility criteria or an objective dissection of what indie is, but this is our indie dream. And so to remain independent whilst owning everything, making our dream game to the scale that we want, at a quality level that was world-class, and where all the developers share in the profit. And also, we didn't want to just make any game. We wanted to make a game that had the 3 Cs. And this is something that we talk about a lot at League of Geeks. And essentially what it means is the game that has cultural success, critical success, and commercial success. And there are a number of them out there. It's not easy to achieve, but obviously the ones that are there, you know who they are. So, of course, we had a big task ahead of us, and we set off to do that. Now, this was a passion project. We actually weren't starting a studio. The whole idea was that it was to be a collective. League of Geeks was going to be a collective, and that was the key, was that we could actually bring people on board for this profit share system that wouldn't interfere with non-compete clauses and all of these things, because it's a passion project that they're working on in spare time. We could have people from the biggest studios in the world, or the greatest animators from Disney or whatever, work on our project in their spare time. And that's how we pitched it. So we spent 8 months, 1 night a week, working on a game. We'd come together, prototype it, because we decided that we were going to make a digital board game. So iPad had come out, I think the 2nd generation had just come out, and we saw the iPad board games category, and it was just offensive, really, to tabletop fans and competent game developers. And we knew it was a space that we could come into and own. And we use the term best in genre a lot, and that was what we were shooting for. We knew we could walk into there, work on something that we love, and be best in genre. So this iPad, truly digital card and board game. And so after 8 months or so of prototyping, Armello was born. We knew that we had this session where it was like, I think it was the 10th iteration, and we were searching for this fun, this adventure, this warmth, and this magic of being 100 hours into an RPG or 90 minutes into the latest Ghibli film, but in a board game, sitting around playing with your friends. And we found it. And so once we did that, it was like, okay, let's take to code. So here's our first ever prototype. We now had a 5th director on board, which we'd gone out and recruited. And that was the technical expertise. And at this point, we were like, okay, now we need some funding. We've got this board game prototype. We've got someone on the code. We have, obviously, the 3 directors continuing. And then also, we have this point system that we're developing in the background, and we're ready to scale up. So it was time to get some cash. We spoke to Film Victoria and Screen Australia. Australia has fantastic funding models. And we got some money, some actual money, not just capital this time. And then we found some very talented people. So Adam Duncan was a key person that came on. He's here at GDC this week. You should meet him if you get the chance and you love Armello's art, as well as Ty Carey. And he actually worked for a place called, or was a director of an animation studio called 12 Field. And so him and Anne-Marie Denham came on board to make a 2D animated trailer. And that trailer went out. Now, there was to be no gameplay or anything, and this was going to be our announce. We knew we needed to create a splash. We were in Melbourne, and we just had to get out there. We were nobodies. No one had even heard of League of Geeks or who we were or anything. It had been happening in a room for 8 months' time. And so we launched it, and it went well. People got it. They understood what we were going for. The trailer had 50,000 views. Everyone was talking about it on the internet. All the while, the game actually looked like this. And we probably announced a little early, but I'll talk about that a bit later on. Now, also, they were saying the right things too. The people were super excited. So at this point, this is when we really started to get people on board, started to get a team going. And then over time, slowly but surely, we got better and better at what we were doing. We brought more talent on board. We iterated. We were testing out the hardware. We knew the game worked. We'd prototyped it on paper for a very long time. Now it was about finding whether it could actually, whether we could bring a board game to life technically on the iPad. And then GDC came around. So for so long, it was like a year or something, we actually hadn't shown anyone any gameplay, and it was time to do that. So we took the game to GDC, lined up a bunch of interviews, had a panic attack at 10,000 feet in the air on the way there, certain that I was going to ruin my career and everyone else's, showing them this shitty game that we'd worked on, and that wasn't the case. As soon as I started showing the press, I'd booked a bunch of interviews in meeting rooms, it just was very, 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 very apparent that people really liked what we were doing. But after GDC, we were very burnt out. We got back from GDC and basically just stopped, essentially, stopped production. We were totally wrecked. We'd done this huge hustle getting there, but we were screwed. And all of this time, we were iterating on our processes of this point system, this distributed production model. Ended up sticking with just Pivotal, Tracker, and Slack, but we were changing things all the time. But through this as well, there were good times. So you've got to understand, this is over the span of 5 years, and I'm sort of breaking it down really quickly. So even though there was burnout, there was very, very dark times. Crying at my desk was one of them, filling out a funding application form. There were good times as well. So this is our former director, actually working in the Hanoi Swing Club. So this is, we really had captured that indie lifestyle that we were looking for as well. And then other things began to happen. So we went to the Indie Mega Booth, and we did this a number of times around the world at Gamescom, PAX Prime, PAX East, a bunch of different things. We travelled over 100,000 miles with Armello from all the way in Australia just to get it in front of people. Then, of course, we were burnt out every time after that. And this was a cycle that kept continuing. So we were like, all right, enough is enough. There's something wrong with this production model. And what had essentially happened is that this point system that we created, the scope was just too great for it. We knew that the game had grown in scope, but every time that we tried to pare it back, we couldn't. Every decision that we'd made about the game's design and what game we were making was on point. It wasn't that we were just feature creeping, it was that we were rising to the occasion that was put before us, to the opportunity put before us. And so we thought, okay, we need to fix this. And things got very, very dark, but we had a plan. So the Arcade is a co-working space in Melbourne, and it just opened up. Tony Reid, the CEO of the Game Developers Association, was heading it up, and he invited us to come along and be a part of it. Around about the same time that all this dark stuff was happening, and I thought, you know what, maybe we just need an engine room. Maybe that's what we need. We need an engine room that can help the people outside of the core development team basically stay motivated. And the game, they can see the game moving along, and we won't have these huge lulls and stalls in the process. So we went to Film Victoria. We said, hey, help us out, give us some cash. We just want, $30,000 or $40,000 or whatever it was. to just sit down in a room with three coders and myself, a producer / designer, and we're just going to rush to alpha, and then if we hit alpha, we're going to hit Kickstarter. So we did that, and then it was successful. Thankfully. We had a very successful Kickstarter. We got in there, we smashed it out, and it was absolutely true. Sitting in there in the arcade, having that little engine room of a few coders and a producer, and then the extra strength of all of the artists and everything outside of that working around the world worked for us. We'd found our mojo again, took it to Kickstarter, and blitzed it. So something that this enabled as well is that this whole process is that we had time. So while we're on Kickstarter, a lot of people approached us, and a lot of people were approaching us along this journey, essentially. Now, we actually had designed this entire system to give us a lot of options, essentially. And this is something that Tony Goodman of Ensemble Studios said once in a Gama Sutra interview about Age of Empires. And he said, a common tactic of publishers is to drag out negotiations until they run out of money. And a deal signed under those circumstances will obviously result in very unfavorable terms. We didn't have to take the first deal that publishers offered, and eventually Microsoft, tired of negotiating, gave us the deal we wanted. Now, that deal ended up being one of the most historically beneficial deals in a studio's favor in a very long time, and paved the way for, rest in peace, Ensemble Studios moving forward. And we were basically in a similar position. So we had numerous conversations with a bunch of different people, had the successful Kickstarter, but obviously decided to continue being indie, doing our thing. And then we took it to early access. Had a wonderful early access. We were called the epitome of doing it right on early access, which is very flattering. And then we headed to launch, decided to jump on PS4 as well, and then got a little bit of help from the Indie Fund crew as well before launch. And then the rest is history. We launched the game, and it looks as beautiful as you can see it right here. So that's basically our history, just in 5 minutes that are actually 13 minutes. So now I'm just going to actually do a bit of a deep dive into a few of the things that have really helped us, or I guess the salient points in our journey. And through looking at these with a bit of a lens or under a microscope, I think you'll begin to see a cross section of what works for us and our unique processes that Kelly's talking about. So Kickstarter was obviously a huge thing for us, and there's a lot that goes into a successful Kickstarter. We kind of got really obsessive for a long time. So we were developing Armello before the Kickstarter bubble started to grow, before Tim Schafer kicked off Double Fine Adventure with the Double Fine crew and all of this. And so we were just sort of waiting in the wings, trying to make it happen. Studying it, watching it. And then we gave it a shot. Didn't really work out because Australia didn't have Kickstarter at that point in time, so we couldn't even get our page launched or, even tax-wise, get around it. So we put it on the back burner, and then we came back to it a bit later. We just seen Darkest Dungeon go live, and they were a huge inspiration to us. There were a number of things that they were doing with their page that we were super keen on. We had this huge spreadsheet that we were keeping, collating all these different things, and it was just time. We could just tell from all the time we'd been looking at it to go at it. So we spent a lot of time thinking about what people want from a Kickstarter and what our dream was and how to, in a sort of a dirty way to say it, how to monetize that for other people. Obviously, you're thinking about this a lot of the time along the way. So we essentially had to sell the dream. So we knew through being a board game that there was a lot of fetishism in physical goods and everything like that. And then also that people were going to naturally be into the art style of the game. It's super evocative. Ty had done a wonderful job on that, along with the team. But also we had this hero-based board game. So we created this Bandit Clan as well, which were exclusive to backers. And this whole methodology was essentially to funnel people into the tiers, into a center tier. So the average pledge on Kickstarter is like $20, $15. Our average pledge was actually $50. So we had an early bird. We used a lot of these little tricks that you see around the place, early bird tiers, things like that. But the tabletop scene on Kickstarter was doing incredible things where they would actually add things in later to a tier and incentivize people shuffling up tiers. And so by the time we were done with Kickstarter, this is our reward popularity. So this is the amount of backers in each tier. So you can see here on the left, this is our $15 tier or whatever it is, and this is no reward. And then this one here is our $55 tier. So we actually had an had an average. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Had an whoa. We had an average pledge of about $50, which we had only about 6,000 backers, but we raised $305,000. So the backer to cash ratio there was pretty exceptional. Then of course we made a big splash with it as well. So we knew that the first 24 hours or the first 48 hours of Kickstarter was super critical. Some people say, all these myths about Kickstarter, it's very much a dark art, that if you don't make 40% of your Kickstarter or 50% of your Kickstarter in the first 48 hours, then you're doomed to fail. So we focused a lot on the launch. So we knew it was time, get Adam and Anne-Marie and 12 Field back on board. Let's do a big animation. So we did a second animated trailer, worked with them, and of course, while you're setting up a page for Kickstarter, a campaign, traveling all around the world, getting it going, you also don't want to be going back and forth on a bunch of different things. But it worked out incredibly well. Everything was super time compressed, but we got there in the end, and the trailer was a huge boon to us. Essentially there was a trip that happened beforehand. So knowing that we needed to get the press and get the big bang out there, I set off for Bit Summit and GDC before our Kickstarter. So our Kickstarter was in April of 2014, and GDC was a month before that. So I flew to GDC and met with a bunch of people there. I teed up interviews with press and other influencers, I guess you'd call them, and showed them what we had. And we had 4 major beats. So we had the fact we were announcing that Lisa Gerrard was on board with the project. We were announcing that we were coming to PC. We had this brand new trailer asset. And then, what was the other one? Oh, and then also the exclusive Bandit Clan that we were going to release with the Kickstarter. And so we gave them exclusive access to these beats, and that we would give them a lead time before other press. And essentially, we had all of this press waiting in the wings right before we launched. So we launched it, and all the press went live. It was fantastic. We did hit our mark within that amount of time. It was like, that 40% within 48 hours. It was crazy. But then 8 hours later, I jumped on a plane and flew to Boston for PAX East to pimp it over there. And I remember arriving, and I saw my good friend Alex Schwartz of Alchemy Labs, and he said to me, "Welcome to the 30 days of despair," which ended up being quite true. Quite true. Kickstarter's a very strange beast. So at the start you have this huge spike, and then at the end you have this huge spike, but in the middle is this thing that we call the trench, because it sort of looks like a trench, I guess. And there's almost nothing you can do to spike it during that time, and it's incredibly intensely stressful thing to have all of this funding on the line, and nothing that you're doing can make it spike. I teed up a gameplay reveal with IGN, and when they dropped it, nothing happened. It just didn't even spike at all. But then we also did a gameplay preview with Kotaku, and they dropped theirs 3 days later, and it kicked off our entire final spike. So who knows what works a lot of the time and what doesn't. So we also did a thing where our hero backers were the $500 tier, and at the $500 tier you could get a hero miniature, and we'd made a conscious decision not to do crazy $5,000, $10,000 tiers. We'd spoken to a lot of people and other developers, and they'd kind of lamented the fact that they'd done things like that. They'd had these people come into the studio, and it's kind of awkward. This person paid you $10,000 to hang out with you. It's like that Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where Larry goes on a date with someone who's auctioned it. But essentially, what am I trying to say here? So essentially, we just had this $500 tier, and we thought that it was going to be crazy, that it would be risky, but at the end of the day, people would just reach out if they wanted to donate more money. We said no to a lot of them. Some of them convinced us to take a little bit of extra cash, and we thanked them publicly. But it worked out really well. We didn't need to gouge everyone. Towards the end, we had stretch goals, and we changed them up. So we started to do this reveal thing where we would reveal one of the rat assassins or the rabbit sapper just bit by bit, slowly their silhouette, and then actually reveal the whole thing. But also, I almost died. We all almost died. So this is probably the most horrible photo taken of me ever. And it was about 3 days, or maybe the last week of the Kickstarter, I think. And so we did an AMA, and I thought I looked great in this photo when it was taken. It's only like a month later, and it's very readily shared amongst the studio if anyone ever brings it up. So towards the end, it was absolutely crazy as well. It was crazy the whole time, but some of us got deathly ill, some of us had strains on our relationships with our partners, all these different things. But of course, in the end, it was worth it. And this was the thing that really enabled us to transition into having a core team with a studio there. And a lot of this as well, a big thing to remember with Kickstarter is that a lot of the money also comes from Kickstarter, within Kickstarter. So we did a lot of work basically mobilizing the community within Kickstarter. So getting them talking about in the comments, because we knew that essentially the rate of comments and how many comments are going on in a Kickstarter is actually quite comparative to the success of a Kickstarter. So we were keeping people talking. We gave them little avatars to put in their badge so they get other people. It's weird. Kickstarter has this kind of like nomadic tribe, like a community of nomadic tribes that moves from one Kickstarter to another. And so worked out well in the end, and also people made crazy images of us and all cool fan art along the way. So yeah, that was Kickstarter. We got there in the end. But a lot of this as well came from, which you'll hear me talk a lot about later, is that we had this process where, as you heard, we had these crazy spreadsheets and everything, but we actually went out to other developers who had done it, and we spoke to them, and we interviewed them, and we, not on camera, but over Skype, and asked them all the things that we wanted to know. We passed them our stuff for feedback. We really lent on the experience of others. And that was really essentially what got us there in the end. Not all of our fantastic art, not all of our, our trailer or our big press beats or all of the work that we did. Obviously that goes into it, but without that consultation that we did beforehand, I don't know if we would have been as successful as we were. All right, so I'm going to talk a bit about marketing now. It's something that I think we've done really well at League of Geeks. We've gotten a lot of coverage from a lot of different people. This is just a random collection of people who've published us, but we've basically been published by every major publication out there, had incredible write-ups, including full multi-page features in games magazines. And this is all for an indie studio making their first game before it's even launched or anything, all the way from Australia. And a lot of this stuff actually converted into real cold hard cash. You can see this in different ways. So this is that Kotaku thing. The gameplay video, and well, this is actually, you can see here, this is Kotaku's, the amount of money that we got on our Kickstarter from people coming straight from Kotaku. So Kickstarter does this great breakdown for you. Then Rock, Paper, Shotgun, and then Board Game Geek. So these are all our sort of some of our major publications. And when I say that, I'm talking about Guardians. So I'm going to go through a few points now. We had this thing where it was basically called the Armello Guardians. And we chose 10 publications that were huge or that spoke directly to an audience that we knew would be into Armello. And our entire philosophy for marketing was that we would totally 100% dedicate ourselves to those 10 publications and making sure that they got, exclusive access to a bunch of stuff and everything, and that it would be a trickle-down effect from there, knowing that smaller sites syndicate larger sites. And that's how we structured every major press announce, whether it be, or press beat, whether it be the announce, whether it be the Kickstarter, whether it be early access, whether it be, our Engines of Fate update at GDC last year. All of these different things, we would package up a nice little thing for our Guardians, and we would meet them beforehand, because face-to-face is always best. And we would essentially get all of this content in this little package and a story personally tailored for them and their publication as well. And then we would give it to them, give them a lead. And then as soon as that ran, we would then we would then do a huge press announce and press release to the rest of the world, essentially. So yeah, face-to-face is always best. We're always traveling the world, getting in front of people, showing them the game, talking. And even if you don't have anything to show, we're always just keeping up relationships, being there, hanging out with folks. Another thing is be bold. A lot of people talk about rules of what you can and can't do with press, and that's totally true. There are things that, press obviously hate, and, things that some game developers do that can really, turn the press off you. But also, if you know the rules, you know how to break them. So here's a pretty good example, I reckon. This is from Game Loading. board games? This guy here. Have you heard of Armello?
Armello is, imagine Game of Thrones meets Kung Fu Panda, but as a digital board game. It's super important to us to get overseas, even though it's incredibly hard being from Melbourne, Australia.
It's one of the biggest mistakes that we've made. It's like thinking that we wouldn't have a build that would be ready to show, and then knowing, like realizing really late in the piece that we did have like heaps to show and that people would be super stoked to see it, and you know, the press would love it. It was just, that was devastating, and knowing that we'd missed out on space. So the original plan was just hardcore guerrilla marketing. It was like, we didn't have a booth, so I just came, I've got my bag, and I just have a build in it on the PC and then on my iPad. Armello, so like A-R-M-E, Armello. Hey, Eric.
Yes, what can I do for you?
Do you have extra space on the booth today?
We have space in that booth,
What
but you have
booth?
to claim a table.
There's a booth over there? Like, is it you guys?
Yeah, Microsoft gave it to us.
Oh, wow. Hey, I just claimed this area
I've
here.
been here for half an hour.
Half hour? Oh, sorry, dude. I didn't realize. All right. Oh, cool. I apologize.
All right.
All right. We'll have to make it work with something else. I might try and grab that wide table over there or something. We found an empty booth that we were going to crash and sneakily show our game there, but then this space became available and we just jumped in and quickly slapped together a stand, and now we're here. We got some printing done. The guys go run out, get some posters printed. So we got one on either side. We bought a monitor, which we can't even take home, but it's showing the video and reeling people in. We've had some people here playing it and everything, and now we just send the word out on Twitter. I'm about to hit up some press via email and everything, let them know that we're here and we're showing the game, and yeah, that's what we're doing.
All right, so there you go. Yeah, that's really, I guess, no, that's the wrong button. Okay, so that's really an example of being bold, and that wasn't the only time I'd done that at a show or a convention. Okay, but here's the thing. I went to PAX straight after the Kickstarter had launched, and that was that PAX East. We didn't have a booth, as you heard, crashed it, and here's what came from that. We met a bunch of press, first of all, there, who gave us extra press during the Kickstarter. We also handed out those flyers that you saw to everyone, and we met as well Spencer Lowe from Sony Strategic Content, who ended up funding a portion of Armello and bringing us to PS4. We met that contact there, and it's arguable that we may not have met him ever, potentially, along Armello's journey if we didn't do that, if we didn't have a booth. He just walked up to the booth and started introducing himself. Also in the video you can see Giant Bomb, Humble Bundle, a bunch of other people swinging by and saying hello. These are opportunities that we put ourselves in the line of fire of. Okay, so the fourth one is collaborate. Now, this is a huge one, and this is one of the biggest ones that I think people get wrong. So many people approach the press and say, hey, I've got this really cool game. Can you please check it out, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, you and everyone else has a really cool game, buddy. The whole thing is that the press have a job. The press are content creators themselves. They have goals, they have bosses, they have things that they want to achieve too. And if you understand that, especially down to a personal level, that actual member of the press, the type of the stuff that they want to write, the type of stories that appeal to them, then you can then pitch them directly stories that they want to run. You can almost, it's like doing their job for them almost. You're making the hardest part of their job, sort of finding these stories and collating them. You're making it so easy for them. So this is what we would do. So our 10 Guardians, we would essentially look at them and we would go, okay, so what sort of stuff does Kotaku want? Okay, well, Kotaku don't do hype or previews or anything like that. They like more editorial stuff. Okay, well, who's there on Kotaku? Okay, well, maybe Kirk Hamilton's there. I know Kirk, okay. And, you know, I know that he knows Armello. Kirk's into music. He plays saxophone and everything. Okay, well, we've got Lisa Gerrard on board. That's pretty epic for a video game. Maybe we can pitch him something about how, you know, Lisa Gerrard's bringing something different to the project. You see what I'm getting at? Essentially, you can create these little articles or create press beats for the press. That's a huge one. So many people miss that. They just go and they just pitch. It's like that thing from Family Guy where he pushes the baby photos in someone's face. It's not the way to go about it. And then the fifth one is as well, don't waste people's time. This is a huge one. Whether it be via email, whether it be in the hall, whether it be like showing them your game, whether it be trying to book interviews when you don't have anything really that they need to be there and see on time. Every time I pulled press aside or I booked an interview with them, I made sure that I had rich content, exciting things to write about, and a plan and assets that they could take, even a press release broken down so they could easily throw it into an article. All of these things all set up so that I wasn't wasting their time. So, and through all of this, we had Armello covered so much. And these things that we were trying to get from, get them to see that we were heading towards this game that was the 3 Cs, that it was working. That again, they were writing these articles and getting all of that stuff across to their readers that we were saying to them. And then of course this translates into people that are keen on your game, and at the end of the day, cash and the ability to make more games. Okay, so early access, we did early access as well. And this was something that we took very seriously. When we came into early access, it was at a point where it wasn't really it wasn't being shown in a good light. There were a couple of high-profile failures on early access, or failures, I should say, where essentially the early access community had reared up and were hating on the developers on there. And so we were entering around that time. But again, we have all of these friends, all these other indie developers out there who had done this. So we went to them and we actually spent, how long would it have been, Lacey? Like a month or something like that, 2 months or something, leading up to early access, where we made this huge spreadsheet of every question that we could conceivably think of about early access, to weird things about the Steam store layout, to how, to how they interacted with their community, how often they did updates and everything. And then we reached out to 10, 15, 20 developers from all around the world who had been on early access or done similar styles of development for a number of years, even ones who hadn't really done so well. We didn't know a lot of these developers too. We obviously do now, but we didn't then. And you know what? They said, they were like, yeah, okay, let's jump on the phone, let's talk it out. And so we did, we questioned them, we found out what we wanted to, and we found out a lot of things through that process. So, for example, talking to Rami, he was like, we don't need to update as much as we do. We committed to it, so we're going to do it, but you could go a bit longer. And then we found out that from talking to other people that probably a month was around about the sweet point that we wanted. We also spoke a lot about price. We found out that 25, coming down to 19 was probably the way to go. All of these little things that we found out from doing it. So we went to early access and we got this great idea from the guys at Armello in the Netherlands. Again, so we're pulling on experience from all around the world, all different developers to help further our success too. The Armello guys that make Awesome Noughts have this thing called Voltar's Vault, and they have a rabid community. It's like so Awesome Noughts is like a 2D MMO. And they have this community that just goes crazy about their game, and they release these updates and they tease them out. So every update is branded, and it has all these features, and they tease it out. They put up a blurred image of whatever it is coming out, and then the community just goes crazy and they start talking about it. So we thought, well, let's do that for early access. And so instead of just pushing like little patches or fixes and stuff like that, we actually did major branded updates, every 6 to 8 weeks to the early access community. And that worked out incredibly well. They just totally reacted so well to that. But we needed a plan, right, of how to come out of early access, and that's the really big thing. So we knew that we were going to have those mic drop, or need those mic drop moments to come out of that atmosphere of early access and basically straight into a successful launch. So what are the things that you need for a successful early access in our experience? So the big one was polish. We knew that the game needed to present well. Even if all the features weren't there, they can handle that, but it needed to be particularly polished. Then also the language that we use. So we actually created a video asset that was me in the studio talking to the camera in a similar vein of a Kickstarter style video. Like, hey everyone, we really want you to, jump on board and help us make the game that we're trying to make, and, showing us, like Tyon is Cintiq and all that sort of stuff. And basically just G'ing up the community, getting them super excited about what's going on. And so we did that, but the language that we used was very specific. So we had seen a lot of crazy overinvestment from a lot of fans and players in the early access community that had really just led to this sort of rabid tearing down of the developers and put some people, when we spoke to them, in very, very dark places. So we made sure to very specifically structure our language so that we were saying that we need their help to make our game. Essentially, it wasn't like, hey, here's an open world survival game, what do you want? And they're like, space cars. And we're like, oh, well, that doesn't really work, you know, and then you have to have that dialogue. Much like you would with a publisher, we set up a relationship where we very clearly communicated the goals and the values of our project, and that they were essentially a light in the dark, a torch in the dark, helping us get through that. And they were fantastic. So again, we did these 4 to 6 week branded drops. That was incredible. And I will tell you right now, I can't even remember an instance where like a number of people were saying, where's the update? Where's the update? As soon as someone did ask where an update was, a community member would just come in and say, oh, it'll be coming soon. They update every 4 to 6 weeks. It was fantastic. It was a perfect amount of time. We got a couple of weeks of dev. We got some time to integrate community feedback, and we had this beautiful flow where we could just do dev, community feedback, bugs, lock the build, get it out, and we'd just flow through that, and we'd get these branded updates, and it worked really well. Another one is being there. This is a key thing that the guys at Amplitude told us. Amplitude from France, it did. Endless Legend. They're really the early access masters. I mean, they were doing it on Steam before there was even an early access function. And that was the thing that they really articulated to us. And I don't think we did it as well as we could have, but it's being there, being in the community and like essentially on the forums, and not just the community manager, but the designers, the artists, all of this sort of stuff. Speak to them, engage with them, because that's what early access is there. And that's what the early access, much like the Kickstarter crowd, that's what the early access crowd are there for. And then weaponize them too. We put a little bug report and like feature request button in the game on the HUD at all times. So it was a little form. You could just click it and go tick, 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 and type up a form, and it would come straight to us, to our inbox. And so at any point in time, if there were crashes, it would even attach a log of the build. So we knew that, you know, we could just open up a log and try and find whatever bug they'd encountered. And that was incredible. We basically had a full QA, a crazy, like full off-site QA team that, that we didn't even have to pay for. In fact, they were paying us to get into the game. And then another one is don't listen, think. That's a huge one. And it's, any of you who have done like user testing know this. Don't listen to what they're saying. Think about what they're saying and why they're saying it. The greatest example we have is a quest system. We went to early access knowing that was the biggest thing we needed their help solving, was to create a good quest system that worked in a multiplayer setting, that told a great story. And they never told us how to fix the quest system. They never said, you should do this. But by telling us that the palace was too hard to get into, by telling us that they felt like there wasn't enough progression, by continually asking us where the talent trees when they were coming, so we had to think about that feature. All of these things sort of tied in and gave us in the studio a solution to the quest system, and was one of the biggest updates and the chunkiest changes to the game that went in. And that was because of them thinking about what they were saying. And then the mic drops. This is super important. So coming out of early access is incredibly hard. We actually set up something, again, we'd heard about it from one of the people that we reached out to, Clay. They took their game down for 4 weeks from Steam before early access, before they launched from early access. So 4 weeks before proper launch, they took their game down, Invisible Ink, and you couldn't get it. You can only wishlist it. You couldn't invite it on the store. So it was sort of like you've got to get in early for early access or wait until it comes out. We love that idea. We went to Valve. We said, we want to do what Clay did. And they said, we don't want to help you not make money, which is a very wise thing to say. Taking this, they were just concerned that we're going to take the store down and that no one would be able to buy the game. So after we spoke it out with them and their concerns, we knew that we had to properly communicate this to players, where the game was. So when people come to look for it, where it was, why it wasn't on the store. So we did that. We ended up doing it because we wanted that real mic drop moment at launch. You see a lot of games come out and they have their early access launch be bigger than their second one. That wasn't feasible for us. That just literally wasn't allowed to happen. So we also had a number of mic drops. We had like 8 features in the game that we were going to, on day one, when we launched, just go boom, here they are. And some of the most requested features that the community had asked for, unlocking different parts of the game, thing like that. So the mic drops are super important. Keep things up your sleeve. And that was something that we got from Rami as well. I met him, probably not met him, but I bumped into him about a year before Nuclear Throne went live fully into full release, and he told me about the mic drops up his sleeve, and it was a real revelation. So thanks, Rami. Okay, so failures, and of course, really what they're called, fuck-ups. We fucked up a lot of the time. There were huge amounts of mistakes along the way. So the big one is failed to act on the scale issue with the point system. So probably a year into the project, the point system just essentially broke down. This distributed model where people were working for profit share, people were burnt out, and especially programmers all of the burden was on them. They were the ones driving the engine room, and it was completely untenable at the scale of the game and all of the systems that needed to be coded up. That it just wasn't working with the point system. And we didn't act on that quick enough, and we put ourselves, probably the game came out a year, 2 years later than it should have because of that. And also, we put ourselves into real dark places at points. God, it's tough even thinking about it, but real dark places at points during development just because of that sort of one thing and the struggles that we went through there. I know that at one point Blake had actually written up his resignation, because it was getting so dark, and I was having similar thoughts of calling it quits. But we didn't. We got through and we solved those issues. I just wish we'd solved them faster. We announced way too early. I don't know if you guys have done 4 years of marketing around the world and trying to think of new reasons, and especially with those rules I'm talking about, like bringing them the content that they want and helping them, not wasting their time. It's really hard to do that. Like the amount of times I've said Game of Thrones meets Kung Fu Panda, it's going to be etched on my tombstone. So that was a big one. And then also localization costs. We blew our budget on localization massively, which as the writer is probably, is largely my fault. And this was a huge cost that we had to bring back on board. And it's sort of a marriage of both promising a bunch of languages in Kickstarter, which came from the fact that we'd supported languages in the studio system. We thought it'd be fine. It wasn't. It ended up costing us a lot of money, 6 figures for localization. Luckily, we've made it back. But that was a big one. And then we missed a polish pass. So people look at Armello and they go, oh my God, it's so polished. I know we just see problems and everyone sees that, but Armello is actually not representative of the type of quality that League of Geeks can achieve, or that we even believe should represent us. And that really bummed us out, like it really got us down, and the game is obviously not the game it should be because of that. And then also we had this thing called the Brains Trust that we're going to do. So we're going to have a month, essentially, where we just send out the build to some of the best minds in the games industry. We're very lucky and very blessed to have a lot of very good friends in the game scene. And we wanted them to look over it, like people that were basically... like Warren Spector asked to test our game and we never even sent it to him. So there you go. That's what I'm talking about there. And then also those 8 mic drops that I talked about as we got towards launch and things got crazy, those mic drops slipped. 4 of them went off the plate. So our launch wasn't as impactful as it probably could have been. Also, I did a month-long press tour before we launched the game. So while the team was, knocking out the final submission and everything, I actually flew to the States and spent a month in San Francisco and went up to Seattle for PAX Prime at the end of that to just go and knock on the doors at IGN and to be here to do interviews and gameplay stuff and with the press here. I don't know, I haven't actually heard of anyone really doing that, but that was something that, this again, how much we invested in marketing and getting face-to-face. But I napped on the plane from LA to San Francisco, and I've never experienced jet lag like that. And this actually, I believe, had an impact on our launch and the amount of articles that we got out and my ability to really hustle during that press tour. Which is funny, right? One nap, like a 40-minute nap on a plane, can cost you probably $100,000. And then we fumbled launch as well, which is a weird thing to say. So we expected Armello to be 4 times as successful as it was. But launch was really pressurized. We had a PS4 that we were going to build that we were going to sim ship with PC to help get that marketing thing going. We were in a vote to play for PS4. But everything seemed to go wrong. Everything was on fire around launch. And I think if we were more effective and more on top of that, then obviously it would have been a better launch. It's a contributing factor there. And then also, because we had crunched going into launch, we were slow to follow up the game. This game on Steam that would live and die on its updates. We were slow to follow up with updates and DLC, and now we're still seeing the impact of that later on. So that was a bit of a bummer. But here's the thing, right? All of this was our fault, and there's a lot of it really is, and I don't think indies talk about this enough, or just developers in general, is that it always seems to be everyone else's fault, or, you know, the market or anything, or the indie-pocalypse or whatever it may be. But I think if you really specifically and carefully and clinically go through your processes, go through your past, go through your history, everything that you've done and your methodology, and you take that and you compare it to other successful games and unsuccessful games, then you can basically pull out what has gone wrong. And you can always trace it back to something, whether it be an unsuccessful Kickstarter campaign, a shitty launch, whatever it is. So I actually think if we had have nailed a bunch of these things, that we would have hit our expectations. All right. Log point system. I know I've mentioned it a bunch. This is really the crux of everything, and I've left it to last for that. So I've spoken about this profit share model, where essentially people, to achieve this goal that we're going for and to leverage our capital, we can bring people on board and bring them in on the profit share. And they work all around the world for points. And I'll go into that. So and the way we recruited, we would just approach anyone. Didn't matter if they were like the lead animator at Weta, or, you know, some senior concept artist at DreamWorks or something. We would approach them. We had an info pack, so there's a few pages of the info pack that would go out, a small PDF, tell them who we are, why we're doing this, what Armello is, all of this sort of stuff, and explain the system. So the first thing that we needed to do was the legals. So it's pretty easy to just say, hey, work on my game. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be cool. But everyone's saying this. I mean, that's the classic thing you get with profit share models all the time. But what we knew that we needed security. We needed to be able to hand these people a contract and say, hey, it's going to be okay. This isn't a Ponzi scheme. We're not going to screw you. This is all kosher. And so we did that, and people would say yes, essentially. They would come on board. So this is how the profit system works, or the point system as we call it. So revenue comes in up the top, and obviously distributors, Steam or whatever, or investors like i.e. Indie Fund or Sony, they get their cut first, and then expenses for the project, and then obviously whatever's left is profit. This is how it was initially split up when we first got into it, when we were looking at the collective style of doing it. 15% go to Log, the company, 35% to the directors, asked for taking on all the risk, all the legal and financial risk and running the project. And then 50% is the pool, or the profit. So 50% of the profit is distributed to anyone who's got points in the pool. We ended up changing it to this when we became more of a studio structure after the Kickstarter, because essentially the directors are the company, right? So we just made it 50% Log, 50% to the pool. And obviously when I say Log, I'm talking about League of Geeks. So this is how it works. A task is assigned a number of points, and then that collaborator is consulted, maybe an artist like Melissa King, who lives up here in the Bay Area. And then, so the director takes that task, assigns it to Melissa once she's looked at the amount of points and the task, and she's like, yeah, that's cool. And then the collaborator will finish the task in the amount of time that we've sort of discussed. And then if Ty is happy with the work, he then approves it, and then that contractor or / collaborator then receives their points. And we have a master spreadsheet that keeps track of all of the points that Blake manages. So you can imagine that if there's 1,000 points total, so there's not a set amount of points, it's actually however many people earn. If there's 1,000 points total and there's 10 tasks at 10 points, that's 100 points for that person. So 1,000 points in the pool, someone has 10 tasks, they're all worth 10 points each, they have 100 points, so that's then 10% of the profit share. And when we pitched this to people, they said yes, but not just anyone. I'm talking like incredible illustrators, people from the animation and film industry, some of the best visual effects studios in the world, AAA developers and award-winning indie developers, and even Academy Award-winning composer and songwriter Lisa Gerard. And they weren't just in Melbourne either. Our team was spread all over the world. We had a distributed team working from almost every corner of the globe. But the whole idea of this was to leverage capital, right? And create a cheaper game. So Armello is not a small game. Armello is quite a large game with incredible production values. It ended up costing us about $1.5 million. Now these are rough. I'm giving you like just the rough numbers here. And so at the end of the day, when we look at, we've made to date, not to date, sorry, until December 31st, so about 3 months after launch. From the beginning of time to 3 months after launch, we made almost $2 million with Armello. And so $1.5 million in costs, and then you take out the the 2 million, you've got around 500k profit left, and then the 50% of that goes into the pool is 250k. So just in 3 months of launching the game, or after 3 months of launching the game, we were able to turn around, and with 12,000 points in total and $250,000 profit, we could say that a point is worth $20 at this point in time. So if you work for a point, which is roughly an hour's worth of work, that's how we assign the tasks, then you get, then the point is worth $20. All right, so, but how many people did we have? We had 46 people from all around the world contributing, little bit, a lot, sometimes just some. But just after the first quarter, and now every quarter these people are going to get paid, our team members are going to get paid out in profit share from this point system every single quarter. So giving out $250,000 across 46 people, probably the smallest contributor with the amount of points got about $300. The largest contributor got $18,000 or around about that, and the average for most of the team was about 5 to 10Ks. Now, every quarter, we're taking the profit and we're splitting it down the middle and we're redistributing it to the team. And we already have a pretty good estimate that the next one is going to be about 50 to 75% of what we've given out. So we're looking to give out 150 to 200K maybe in March or something. And this actually continues forever. For as long as the game is making money, these people are making money. The people that put their blood, sweat and tears, that believed our crazy idea, God, I don't know, what was it, like 5 years ago, and came on board. And there are some people that have been on board for those 5 years, like Simon Boxer or Gavin Custers or Adam Duncan, like these people that really hung around and were heroes of the project. They deserve this. So it's pretty special. Now, another thing is relationships. One of the reasons, I think the key reasons why we're successful at League of Geeks is because we're really good at keeping relationships. And now whether that be with partners, whether that be with press, whether that be with our audience, or whether that be with our team, and we speak to everyone as well. This is the thing, it's an open door policy, want to chat anyone about anything. And also because we have this model, again, Tony Goodman's quote, we have this model where we can just basically have these discussions, and we can have the time to think about it and talk about these things and spend the time having these relationships and making them work for us and work for them. And of course, there's a bunch of indie teams out there. Some of the most important relationships that we've had have been with other indies. I'm going to actually end on, all right, yeah, let's do it. We're getting towards the end here, so I'm just going to play this for you. This really encapsulates what I'm talking about, I think. This was meant to be, this is something that we did again. We were going to share it with Kotaku solely for them, give them something interesting, but it never ended up making it to air, I guess.
So we went to PAX, but we didn't have a booth, which is kind of strange, considering that we're coming all the way from Melbourne, Australia. 17,000 miles over the Pacific just to go to a convention that we're not even showing our game at. It's pretty crazy, but, you know, it's one of the reasons why we've been successful, you know. I think, well, I don't think, I know, like the major benefits of going are just huge. They're too innumerable to list out.
But we'll try.
Yeah, but we'll try. I'll
Right
definitely
now.
try. Right now, I will try to list them all out. No, I think a big one is friends, right? I think that's the main one more so than anything is there are a lot of people in this industry and in the scene and, you know, making things in the same medium as us that we just love, that are just rad and that we want to see a lot of, and we want to be constantly kept in the loop of what they're doing and be touching base with them and having a dialogue, an ongoing dialogue with those people. It helps us become better developers and more well-rounded and seeing those people is invigorating as well. It's like if you could go and hang out with the most inspiring, most creative people in the world, why wouldn't you do that? You know, and I think that's what we really feel about this stuff. I know that's why we go to PAX and why we go to GDC and everything. Of course, there are other reasons like press and to meet a bunch of, you know, our fans and, you know, the people that are actually playing Armello and that are going to buy it when it comes out and support our studio, and that's awesome. There are a bunch of people at these places that can help Armello and League of Geeks be as good as it can be and help us make the best games and empower us as creatives. And there are things that we can help them out with, and that's one of the main reasons why we go, yeah, for sure. There are a huge number of different ways to work with people, and we're always looking for cool ways to expand and improve, I guess, the experiences that we're bringing our players and our audience.
So that obviously really encapsulates things. Michaela's clapping because he made the video, so. All right, so that really encapsulates things. I'm going to quickly run through our takeaways very rapidly. So relationships. So this is takeaways for the entire talk, things that I reckon all of you should be taking note of. Relationships are key to our success all along the way. Every opportunity that we've had is because of relationships that we had with people or that we successfully navigated. Language is everything, whether it be our incredible optimism bias, whether it be the ownership that we talk to the team with in regards to their ownership of the game, whether it be the way we engage with our community, and even just like sort of using language to blindly lead us into things that we shouldn't have been able to achieve. Very incredibly important. Make the experience of others your own. This is key. So many people don't do this. You hear often fail fast. Fuck that. Don't fail. Find other people who have or who have succeeded and find out why they failed or why they succeeded and then do it right. Ownership amongst the team, this is a huge one. We had 46 people around the world who believe that Armello is their game, and that's because it is. And it is only possible, and they were only motivated, and they only did the incredible job that they did, and Armello was only successful because they had ownership of the game. Leverage your strengths. I can talk and I can travel the world, I can meet people, I can pitch a game. Ty is an incredible art director. Blake is an incredible systems designer and man on the accounts and business side of things. We use that to our power. We use that to then bring other people on and leverage our strengths. We didn't try and step out of that, and we lean into that. And this goes everyone down the team as well. Know your strengths, leverage them. Pay attention. This is a huge one. Again, when we talk about people releasing games at the wrong time or like thinking that everything is everybody else's fault or their failures are, it's probably because they haven't paid attention. Pay attention to what your peers are doing, what the scene is doing, what the industry is doing, what you're doing. Which brings me to my next point. Understand every failure. Incredibly important. Your little ones, your big ones, other people's ones. Again, don't let yourself fail when you shouldn't have. And then this one is incredibly important. For 5 years, we made this game. That's a very, very, very long time. And I look a lot older now than I did when we started. But because we celebrated every victory, whether it be just that we got another cool artist on board or that like Kotaku called us the most interesting game of 2014, whatever they are, you must celebrate them, and you must celebrate them with your team. All right, that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. Myself and Blake Mitzi and Ty Carey will be in the wrap-up room after this if you want to ask us any questions about anything.